Number 12. Okay, first entry, and there are probably gonna be some people unhappy already. A lot of Monster Hunter fans are gonna have Kushala rooted in their memory as the worst, or arguably the worst fight in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, and that's a pretty notable hit on his perception within the fanbase. Heck, it was enough of a blemish that I argued for a few monsters to be in this spot instead of him, but I was eventually convinced otherwise when this list was being made by the guys I was making this list with. Kushala in World and Iceborne was kind of miserable, preferring to use a lot of stall tactics, preferring to stay out of the reach of hunters, hide himself in tornadoes, and he gradually, or straight out, just became immune to a lot of the tools and the tricks that were originally implemented into his fight to give hunters counters to his mechanics, kinda making him feel a lot cheaper than he had ever been. And this encounter is gonna stick around in people's minds. And although I do think that this blemish, and as well as the quality of some other flagships, means that there are some other monsters who deserve this spot, Kushala does not deserve to be maligned for all time due to one lackluster appearance. World's version of Kushala is sandwiched between a history of fairly challenging encounters, backed by a tricky mechanic with weaknesses, and an entirely revamped fight that redeemed Kushala almost immediately. This dragon's got a lot of history to him, not all of it fondly remembered, but it's important nonetheless. I'd be willing to bet that Kushala is an often overlooked flagship, and that some out there might not even know or forgot that he was one. Headliner of Monster Hunter DOS, a game that was never brought to the West, this metalloid monstrosity has probably never been more than an early tier Elder Dragon for most of us, and in terms of gameplay has been outdone by some of his contemporaries. My knowledge on DOS is pretty limited, and it can be tough to dig up information on it, but one need only look to the games before DOS and see what this guy has done for arguably the most, maybe the second most important monster category in the franchise. Before DOS, we had Fatalis, Lao Shenlong, and Kirin for Elder Dragons, all online-only quests. Of the three, only Kirin could be fought on normal maps and was mostly just a typical fight, if not a little bit more challenging. And Fatalis and Lao Shenlong had uniquely designed repel mechanics in their own tailor-made arenas, giant monsters that couldn't feasibly fit on any other map. Kushala and the Elder Dragons he brought with him combined, altered, adapted, and expanded on the groundwork of their first-generation predecessors to make some of Monster Hunter's most memorable encounters. Kushala led the second generation of Elder Dragons to a mythical status. Not only could these new dragons be fought on conventional maps like Kirin, not only could they be repelled after taking sufficient damage like Lao Shenlong, but Kushala and the other second generation elders could carry over their lost health and broken body parts between battles and travel from map to map, granting the player this feeling of tracking a foe across the continent, clashing with a fated enemy again and again until the target was finally vanquished. And to go above and beyond even that, Kushala added greater and grander layers to the pedigree of the Elder Dragons. He brought with him a sort of puzzle boss aspect to these fights, generating a wind aura that can repel weapons and projectiles, an aura that must be countered with proper positioning, flash bombs, or poison. And to make things even more interesting, his horns, which allowed him to generate his aura, could only be broken once he was past a certain health threshold. Weapon choice, positioning, item usage, as well as aggressive, persistent, and smart fighting skills must be honed and mastered in order to properly deal with a Kushala. Lamentably, many of these mechanics have fallen to the wayside or have been cherry-picked in the 5th generation, an act that I believe was a step too far for the sake of quality of life. The mysticism, mystery, and epic encounters that were the 2nd generation Elder Dragons and their wide array of special mechanics created memories that will stick in the minds of those who played those games. And I'm holding out a little hope that this might be course-corrected one day. Not to mention, we still see these special break part mechanics and special reactions to certain statuses to this day. They might not be as prominent or as compiled into single fights as they once were, but the legacy of these complexity-laden duels still endures. It's tough to say for certain if Kushala Daora was the first of the second generation Elder Dragons to be conceptualized. Information and interviews into Dos's creation are tough to come by, but considering his simple yet fundamentally draconic design and his honor as the flagship of Dos, it's not hard to imagine Kushala Daora being at least partially the template from which the others derived from. And look at what a historic legacy has come from Kushala Daora. Though the four-legged, two-winged Fatalis did come before, Kushala created a unified look for so much of his kin. It is from his shape and stance that many of the legendary elders, including other flagships and some of the series' most powerful dragons to date, are derived. And given time, a whole new branch would come to reinterpret Kushala's established trend and create a brand new line of elders. And the franchise itself seems to have a deep sense of reverence and acknowledgement of Kushala Daora. There are pieces of artwork depicting him in-game. The old legends of the jungle show him as a dragon once worshipped by the people of this land, only to be rebelled against in ancient days. His discarded metal skin left at mountain peaks has served as both Easter eggs and as a display of his life cycle. The discovery of his body parts within ancient civilization structures has generated speculation as to the makeup of said structures within the fanbase. He is one of the major antagonistic forces within Monster Hunter 4, an old adversary for two of the characters within that game, humbling a younger ace commander and retiring his mentor permanently. All that aside, Kushala Daora is a wickedly cool concept himself. A very traditionally dragony dragon, with a body covered in a thick layer of sleek gleaming steel. And I imagine at some point someone asked, well, how the heck can a dragon with a steel shell fly? The answer, have him capable of generating air currents so strong that he can assist his wings in getting him off the ground. Thus, you have a silvery steel dragon wreathed in a wind aura, capable of conjuring great storms and powerful enough to vomit up tornadoes. A combination of ideas I don't think any game series besides Monster Hunter would ever think of. One may need a bit of suspension of disbelief to accept that any amount of wind shy of that produced by a Category 4 hurricane is going to suspend a dragon made out of metal with the rough proportions of a monster truck in midair. But no dragon in this universe should have anywhere close to the capacity to fly around, so I think I can let that go. And just as an extra layer of thoughtfulness in the design, he doesn't just molt, his hide begins to rust over and he forces himself out of his old worn shell. One of the cooler bits of monster ecology out there. The games, the developers, and the world of Monster Hunter has a great respect and reverence for the mighty dragon of wind and steel. He reinvented the Elder Dragon on numerous fronts, and further encouraged the creation of monsters with various layers to their defenses, mechanics, weaknesses, and part breaks. Kushala Daora will forever have a stain upon his steel hide from Iceborne, yes, but it is merely a stain. Should his newfound excellence remain consistent, then it will be a stain soon faded. The second generation of Monster Hunter was a bold time, unafraid to enhance everything that had made its predecessors so great, and it dared every one of its following generations to challenge and to grow the franchise as it had, and Kushala Daora is emblematic of that change. So much of the modern Elder Dragon is shaped in his image, carved into history by his unstoppable gales. The developers overstepped with his mechanics once, but that old rust is shed, and a new dragon has emerged, and the past and future of Monster Hunter shall continue to be defined by the shadow within the tempest.